Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
Skepticism and Mathematical Realism. 1. Introduction. Skepticism and its modern crisis. Skepticism is one of the oldest and most powerful intellectual traditions in human thought. From the ancient Greeks to the critical rationalism of Karl Popper, skepticism has served not as a barrier to knowledge, but as its test, a discipline of doubt that refines, tempers, and strengthens belief. Yet, in the contemporary intellectual milieu, skepticism faces a paradoxical degeneration. That which was once a tool for deepening inquiry is now often wielded as a weapon of negation, flattening discourse, dismissing alternative metaphysical models, and reducing the rich plurality of human knowledge to the narrow corridor of empirical falsifiability. This essay argues that such an impoverished deployment of skepticism, what we will call unconsiderate skepticism, amounts to an epistemic pathology. When skepticism is unreflectively reduced to the crude axiom, if it can't be empirically falsified, it isn't real, it becomes not an instrument of clarity, but of suppression. It denies not only the interiority of subjective experience and the tacit metaphysical assumptions of science itself, but also the rational possibility of a spiritually resonant, atheistically grounded metaphysics rooted in mathematical realism. In its place, we advocate for what we term considerate skepticism, a mode of skeptical inquiry that maintains critical rigor without degenerating into epistemic nihilism. It recognizes the necessity of certain unfalsifiable assumptions, not as dogma, but as scaffolds for meaningful cognition, social trust, and metaphysical creativity. 2. A genealogy of skepticism, from ancient Greeks to Popper. To understand the crisis of modern skepticism, one must revisit its philosophical lineage. The Greek skeptics were not advocates of cynicism or denial. Rather, they practiced epike, a suspension of judgment, to avoid the suffering caused by dogmatic commitment. Their goal was ataraxia, inner peace, not scientific reductionism. By contrast, Enlightenment skepticism, exemplified by Descartes' methodic doubt, sought indubitable foundations for knowledge. Descartes famously doubted the senses, the body, even mathematics, ultimately concluding that the only certainty was the self-aware subject, cogito ergo sum. Here we see a key point. The skeptical process led not to nihilism, but to a reconstructed metaphysics rooted in consciousness. Later, David Hume would cast doubt on causality, identity, and even the continuity of the self. Yet Hume did not call for the abandonment of social trust or moral sentiment. Rather, he called attention to the fragility of reason when divorced from human nature. It was in the 20th century that skepticism underwent its most radical reconfiguration. Karl Popper's model of critical rationalism formalized the demand for falsifiability, the criterion by which scientific theories could be demarcated from metaphysical or pseudoscientific ones. Popper's insight was to see science not as a collection of verified truths, but as a system of conjectures perpetually open to disproof. While this model revolutionized scientific epistemology, it also sowed the seeds of epistemic dogmatism when misapplied. Falsifiability became not a methodological guideline, but a philosophical gatekeeper. Anything unfalsifiable was no longer merely not science, it was deemed nonsense. Thus emerged the cult of crude empiricism, a worldview wherein the interior, the abstract, the aesthetic, and the metaphysical were treated as epistemological liabilities. 3. The false clarity of physicalism. Among the many victims of unconsiderate skepticism, physicalism enjoys a curious exemption. Physicalism, the doctrine that all entities are physical or supervene on the physical, is often positioned as the default metaphysical stance of rational moderns. It postures as the natural conclusion of scientific progress, the only metaphysic left standing after the gods and ghosts have fled. Yet physicalism, when properly interrogated, is riddled with epistemic blind spots. It is not and cannot be a scientifically proven hypothesis. There exists no conceivable experiment that could demonstrate the non-existence of non-physical phenomena. Rather, physicalism is a metaphysical postulate, an ontological preference masquerading as empirical necessity. To claim that only physical entities exist is to make a universal negative about the structure of reality. Such claims are inherently unfalsifiable and therefore, by the physicalist's own criterion, pseudoscientific. The irony is palpable. More damningly, physicalism cannot account for its own epistemic foundations. The laws of logic, the structure of mathematics, the intentionality of thought, all are non-physical. The very frameworks that enable physicalist reasoning are themselves invisible to physical measurement. This contradiction reveals a fundamental asymmetry. Physicalists deny to others the metaphysical premises they quietly embrace themselves. For subjectivity and the necessity of metaphysical assumptions. Beyond its internal contradictions, unconsiderate skepticism fails catastrophically at the level of human experience. If one applies the criterion of falsifiability to all beliefs, then the existence of other minds must be doubted. I can never access your subjectivity. Your pain, your thoughts, your love, all are empirically opaque. If skepticism denies the validity of any claim that cannot be measured, it must also deny the reality of persons. This epistemology annihilates the foundation of social interaction. Trust, empathy, and moral responsibility presuppose the existence of conscious others. A community of physical automata is not a moral community. Without the metaphysical assumption of intersubjectivity, civilization collapses into solipsistic nihilism. Such assumptions are not irrational. They are pre-rational, axiomatic. Just as mathematics relies on unprovable axioms, so does social life rely on unprovable metaphysical commitments. A considerate skepticism recognizes this and affirms the legitimacy of such assumptions not as arbitrary beliefs, but as necessary conditions for coherent experience. 5. Mathematical realism. A bridge between science and spirit. If physicalism fails both logically and existentially, what alternatives remain? One compelling candidate is mathematical realism, the view that mathematical structures exist independently of human minds and constitute the true ontology of the universe. This view is not new. Plato's world of forms, Gödel's Platonism, and Max Tegmark's level 4 multiverse all articulate versions of this idea. The essential claim is this: mathematics is not a language we invented, but a reality we discovered. If this is so, then the universe itself may be a mathematical object and consciousness a pattern within it. From here arises the possibility of an atheistic spirituality. In this model, the spirit is not a supernatural entity but a mathematical structure, a complex computational object embedded in an infinite fractal manifold. It perceives time by jumping across isomorphic instantiations of its configuration in different coordinates of the multiverse. It stores memory as modification of a three-dimensional scalar field and enacts agency via probabilistic self-modification. Though such a model may lack direct falsifiability, it is no more metaphysical than the invocation of Hilbert spaces or wave function collapse. It is a metaphysics not of superstition, but of rational speculation, a spiritual realism grounded in mathematical structure rather than mythic projection. 6. Art, ethics, and the epistemology of the immeasurable. The dominance of empirical science has blinded many to the reality that not all truth is testable. The value of a poem, the justice of a law, the depth of love, these cannot be falsified or verified in a laboratory. Yet they are not therefore meaningless. Indeed, the most vital dimensions of human life resist measurement. Ethics, aesthetics, identity, and narrative all operate in domains where meaning is negotiated, not deduced. An epistemology that dismisses these as subjective illusions is not merely incomplete, It is dehumanizing. The great danger of unconsiderate skepticism is that it colonizes the mind with a flattening ontology. It seduces the thinker into believing that only what can be measured is real, and thus blinds them to the texture of existence. A poem can be true without being literal. A life can be meaningful without being measurable. Considerate skepticism restores balance. It permits us to question and affirm, to measure and to feel. It denies dogma while allowing for wonder. It is the epistemic equivalent of compassion, a recognition that the unknowable is not therefore unreal. 7. Toward a new enlightenment. Epistemic pluralism. What is needed in our time is not a retreat from science, but an expansion of reason, a new enlightenment that does not conflate rationality with reductionism. Epistemic pluralism must replace epistemic absolutism. Different domains of inquiry require different standards of justification. Physics needs falsifiability. Metaphysics needs coherence. Ethics needs empathy. Art needs resonance. The role of skepticism is to mediate, not to annihilate. It should challenge, refine, and provoke, but not obliterate. A truly rational mind does not merely reject the unfalsifiable, it interrogates its necessity, its beauty, its coherence. Atheistic spirituality, grounded in mathematical realism, offers such a possibility. It neither appeals to divine revelation nor retreats into nihilistic reductionism. It envisions a cosmos where spirit and structure are one, a universe whose fabric is computation, whose rhythm is logic, whose beauty is infinite. 8. Conclusion. Beyond the tyranny of empiricism. We live in an age of paradox. Never before has humanity had so much data and yet so little understanding of itself. The crisis of meaning in the 21st century is not due to ignorance, but to an epistemology too narrow to contain the fullness of being. Unconsiderate skepticism, with its demand for universal falsifiability, is insufficient for the spiritual and philosophical needs of human life. It blinds us to the interior, the abstract, the moral, and the beautiful. It devalues personhood, suppresses metaphysics, and stunts the imagination. Considerate skepticism, by contrast, offers a vision of reason that is both sharp and soft, rigorous and reverent. It affirms that some truths cannot be tested, but must still be reckoned with. It sees in mathematical realism not a fantasy, but a frame, not a refuge from science, but its rightful expansion. In the end, to be truly skeptical is not to doubt everything, but to doubt wisely. To suspend judgment not out of fear, but out of respect. To see the mystery not as a problem, but as a possibility. And to know that the deepest truths may not shout, but whisper from the unmapped regions of the mind.